oddly enough, South Carolina has despite being a middling team in the SEC, in recent years, South Carolina has produced a lot of NFL talent. And not only produce NFL talent, but like producers at the NFL level and guys that will continue to produce at the NFL level. But that won't continue this year because the guy we're talking about today isn't that great. Yeah, his name is Shi Smith. And in 2017, he steps on campus and puts up a pretty impressive year. He has 29 catches for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he's third in the team in receiving. As a freshman, that's pretty solid. I mean, he's behind Brian Edwards and Hayden Hurst, and, well, it would have been Deebo Samuel, because in 3 games, Deebo Samuel had 250 yards. So he would have been fourth, but still, I mean, that's a pretty solid showing for a freshman, and I'm sure he's going to improve the next season, which he does. In 2018, as a sophomore, he comes in and puts up 45 catches for nearly 700 yards and 4 touchdowns. And he's third in the team in receiving once again, behind Samuel and Edwards, because Hurst goes on to the NFL. And it was really a 3-man show because fourth on the team in receiving behind Shi Smith was Kyle Pollard, who had just 200 yards. So that's not a very solid season. And I mean, as a sophomore putting up those numbers, going into your junior year, you'd expect big things, right? Because this time, not only Hurst is gone, but Samuel is going to leave, so it's just him and Edwards. But he comes in as a junior in 2019 and puts up just 489 yards to Brian Edwards' 816 yards. So Edwards kind of washes him, and Edwards had beat him 2 straight seasons before this. Edwards comes in and just bodies him once again, and that leaves a lot of questions on his profile. If he would have continued to ascend and maybe got to Edwards' level, we could have had a discussion, but he comes in and puts up a lackluster season. This is actually the year that he breaks out, which is kind of crazy because it just shows how low the market share was there, the threshold rather. But he breaks out, but not in a very impressive fashion, and it's later in the year. So anyways, as a freshman, or going into his sophomore season, Hayden Hurst left. Going into his junior season, Deebo Samuel left. And now going into his senior season, Brian Edwards leaves, which leaves him as the de facto 1, right, obviously. And he comes in as a 22-year-old, so he's pretty old. He's almost geriatric now. And he puts up 57 for 633 yards and 4 touchdowns in just 9 games. And that's very impressive because the second and third receiver combined for less than him. So that's really impressive, right? But he does that as a 22-year-old on a team with no talent. And Brian Edwards, who was in the draft last year, is actually younger than him right now. And Brian Edwards played 4 years in college. So that's not very impressive either. Shi Smith was perpetually outproduced by better talent. He was never the guy in the offense with other talent around him, and he had to wait until all the talent filtered out before he was the guy. And even then, he wasn't incredibly impressive because he was so old. He breaks out and commands a big percent of the offense, but counting stats don't really stand out significantly from the other stats because the team wasn't very good without the other talent around him. He has subpar size at 5'10", 186, and an average BMI, and his BMI is almost average on the dot. So even this, he's likely pigeonholed into the slot, and his subpar breakout doesn't bode well. I mean, the Dominator is pretty elite, but given the context around it, I mean, so how Dominator works is it takes your best market share of receiving yards and touchdowns and adds them together, and they used your best and last season. But the thing with Shi Smith was his last season was double counted because it was also his best season from a market share perspective. So this Dominator is kind of misleading. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's like very impressive, but this Dominator, which is in the 92nd percentile, was a product of this season, which isn't incredible. So you can kind of rationalize that in not a great manner. So all in all, he's a low upside player with his low size. He's kind of pigeonholed into the slot, and with his perpetual lack of production, I can't see him working out too well in the pros. I mean, don't get me wrong, he could be a good player for an NFL team, and his best case scenario is likely like a Jamison Crowder, which is not very high upside. And don't get me wrong, Crowders are pretty cool, but that's almost his best case scenario, which isn't very solid. So I don't want Chad Smith. He was constantly outproduced by Samuel, Hurst, Edwards, and he all right. So like here's the big thing for me. Edwards got third round capital, and Edwards produced him or outproduced him every single year that they were on campus together. So what is Smith's ceiling for draft capital? 4th round, 5th round? At that point, I mean, all right. So let's say he gets 4th round capital, which is like very generous. 4th round capital, bad size, bad breakout age, outproduced by talent everywhere, likely pigeonholed into the slot. So he's a 4th round capital guy that is landing spot dependent with low upside given his size already. Like I just don't see it. Some film watchers might like Shi Smith, but he doesn't work out number wise. So I'm gonna advise you stay away from him in every format because his upside is non-existent. Don't take him.